Welcome everyone to this webinar series on Irricad. This is the first in a number of webinars for Irricad training that we're going to do. Thank you very much for registering, and we really hope that these webinars will be useful to you. They will be recorded, and so they will be available for people to watch at a later date, and I think they will become a really good resource for Irricad training. We have a lot of people who have registered for the course and from many different countries. And I'd like to start by introducing our team. The first version of Irricad was released in 1987, which is over 30 years ago. And most of the people that in our team that you see have more than 20 years experience in Irricad. My name is Graham Hutchinson. I'm with Nelson Irrigation, and Nelson has been involved with Irricad since 1992. Mike Noftel is an independent consultant, and he's in Washington State here, very close to us, and has been helping us with Irricad support for many, many years. Steve McCoon is with Nelson Irrigation also, and has a lot of experience with Irricad and irrigation design. Jo Vivier is from the Irricad team in New Zealand, and she looks after support globally. And Ignacio Del Campo is with Nelson in Chile. He has a lot of experience with design and Irricad, and has run several Irricad courses in Latin America. Today's topic is navigating Irricad, and it will be presented by Mike Noftel. Please use the question and answer feature of Zoom to ask questions, and our team will try to answer them during the webinar. Para los asistentes de habla español, se puede hacer preguntas por el menú Preguntas y Respuestas. Trataremos de contestarlas en español. So for now, I will hand over to Mike, and Mike will begin the session today on navigating Irricad.
Well, thank you, Graham. Let me get a couple things situated for us here. Hold on just a second. So I can do my screen share. I know we practiced this. You'd think I would be better at it. No, that's not what I want to do. Let's stop that. Let's go straight into sharing the Irricad screen. And let's talk a little bit about what our goals are today. This is the very first session of a series of a number of webinars that we're going to do. So I think that the main thing that we want to be able to accomplish today is to give you an overview of the software, a little bit to feel acquainted with it, where you can find some of the features to get started, go through some of the menus, and probably most importantly, where to find help in the software. So we'll go through some of the help menus, go through the help menus a little bit as well. So, but as you can see, if you've not experienced Irricad before, and you have any other CAD experience, you'll see something that looks pretty similar to what you may have seen in the past. We have an open workspace here where we would do the design work, but we also have toolbars and other features that help us accomplish the design. So I think the first thing that we want to do is spend a little bit of time looking at some of our menu options across the top here. We won't delve into all the features of all of them because many of them will be addressed in other webinars, but a few that probably need to be addressed now that may not be addressed naturally in any of the others are the file menu. So if we look under the file menu here, we're going to see some things that should be fairly familiar, ways to start a new design or open an existing design or save a design that we're working on currently. But we're also going to see in this section where we have the ability to do some importing, whether that's imagery or contour information or some other CAD drawing details, or open other types of CAD files through the import. Export allows us to do similar in that we can export to other file formats, that sort of a thing. Here's where also we would find the print tools. And then we're going to see a list here of recent designs that have been opened, so that if you're working in a design, you come back to it. You don't have to go through the entire process in order to find that, that design and start again with it. The next one that we'll spend a little bit of time in is the View menu. In the View menu, we're going to see a lot of our zoom options, zoom window, zoom previous, those types of things, and ways to pan on the screen. But probably the things that we won't touch in other sessions that we need to look at today are these three options here: toolbar, status bar, and layer bar. Now, layer bar is checked on, and you'll see over here on the right-hand side, this is the layer bar. So here's where we could determine whether or not the layer bar is turned on or off. If we don't want to see that there, and we want more workspace, we can always turn the layer bar off. There's also a couple other ways to manage it. If you want the layer bar off, so you have more screen, but you want to be able to access it otherwise, under the settings, we can also look at layers, and we can pull a pop-up that will give us access to the layers as well. And then the third way to manage the layer bar is, I'm not sure if you can see, but there's a little push pin looking icon right there. And if you select that, then what it's going to do is it's going to put the layer bar in a hidden kind of a mode where it's only going to be available if you move the cursor over the layer bar section, and then it'll fly out for you. You can use it and then move away and it will disappear again. So a couple different ways to manage the layer bar. The use of the layer bar is so that we can determine what layers are visible and printable on the screen. So as we go through more of these sessions, you'll see where the layer bar gets used extensively to turn layers on and off to make things a little bit easier to see and navigate on the screen. Also under the view is where we would see an option to turn on or off the status bar. Status bar, quite simply, is this layer all the way, or this all the way down the bottom, where it has the X, the Y, the D, and the A. So that's can be turned off to create more space, or if you don't use that frequently. I like to use it, and there's a couple things that I use it for. We'll go into some CAD drawing stuff a little bit in depth later on in the session, but quickly, what the status bar does, for example, if I'm in a drawing line mode, wherever my cursor is, if you look down here at the X and Y, those are the coordinates of where my cursor is. And if I were to click to start a line, you'll see that the X and the Y will change, obviously, as I'm moving my cursor, but also down here, the D for distance and the A for angle will also change relative to where I started my line. So I can use the distance and the angle to determine the length and angle that I want to place a line on the screen. And it just gives me a visual of where I'm at on the screen. So if you wanted to turn that off, that's where you could do that. Let's spend a little bit more time here in toolbars. As you can see, around the outside of my workspace, I have a series of toolbars with tool buttons associated with them that are a secondary way that you can access tools and features in Irricad. Obviously, the primary way would be to use the menus across the top, but under View, the toolbar pop-up allows us to learn a little bit more about the toolbars, the buttons that are included on the toolbars, and which toolbars we may want to have visible. You can customize very much so what toolbars and buttons are available. For example, here under the first tab, the Toolbars tab, here is a list of all the available toolbars. And you're going to want to customize those so that it's the least amount of clutter and the most amount of impact for you as you go through the design process. But for example, the file toolbar, if I were to toggle that back off, you would see up here that entire toolbar would disappear. That's the toolbar that I use to save files, to open files, for printing, those types of things, shortcut features. Saves a few clicks when you have a lot of designs in the pipeline. The fewest amount of clicks possible is definitely a benefit. If we go to the Commands tab, this is where we can see all the buttons that are associated with a certain toolbar and also learn a little bit about them. So when I click on the File option here, it shows me all the tool buttons that are associated naturally with that toolbar. And if I click on any of them, it's going to give me a description down below of what that toolbar is for. So we can learn a little bit about them and then determine how we want them to be oriented on our workspace. For example, you'll see up here, I do not have all of the toolbars that I could from the File menu in existence up here. There's some that I just don't use often enough to justify them taking up what I would call valuable real estate. So a couple of those are the About Irricad and the Help menu button. And so I've removed some of those from the screen so that they're not taking up that real estate. If I wanted to add them back, it's easy enough. I can just select it here and I can add that toolbar button, and I can add it wherever I want it to, and it'll exist. If there's a tool button that you don't want on the screen anymore, it's as easy as selecting that button and pulling it out into the screen. It will automatically disappear. A couple other things I've done that I find helpful, that others that you might find helpful as well, is the save icon. If I'm working in a design and I'm maybe in the lower right hand corner or away from the save button and I want to hit the save button just to make sure that as I finish a process that it's saved, then what I've done is I've actually taken that save icon and I've distributed it to a couple other places on the layout so that wherever I'm at in the screen, it's just a short movement with the mouse to get to a save icon. So there may be ways that you might want to customize those things, remove certain toolbar buttons, add them multiples in different places. But you can go through and look at each one of these toolbars and learn a little bit more about them. You can adjust where they are located on the screen. I have mine in a pretty customized place, but you can pull it out and have it float. You can move it down below. You can essentially move those however you want to. That makes the most sense to you for the way you do design work. So that's a little bit about the toolbars. Again, that's a secondary way. For many, it's the primary way, but it's a second way to access many of the features. As you move over a toolbar, it will also give you a little pop-up to let you know. That one says linear copy, that one's radial copy. So you get a little bit of pop-up there to let you know what that tool button is intended to be for. So a good way to kind of spend some time and get things situated the way you like them, whether it's having the layer bar on or off, or customizing the layout of your toolbars and tool buttons to make things as efficient as possible. One of the other menus that we'll go through is the settings menu. We won't spend a lot of time in here, but there's a couple of places that are worth seeing and understanding. One of them would be the units option. So this is where you could you'll get this pop-up with tabs for all the options that were under the settings menu. But when we chose the units option, we get a couple things here. We get an option whether we want to be default as US units or metric units. But even within inside of those units, you have the ability to customize each of those. So obviously I'm set to US units here, but for example, outlet flow, maybe depending on whether you're doing high flow, higher flow outlets or micro outlets, lower flow, you may want this outlet flow readout in reports and other places to be in gallons per hour or gallons per minute, or you can mix and match between metric and US units as well, because they're all available to you in the drop-down list. So you can go through those on your own time and see what the options are there and see what makes the most sense to you as well. Number of decimal places, that by default is probably set to 2. I've increased it to 3. It's how it shows up here on the X and Y and the distance with more or less decimal points and decimal places, and as well in the reports. So you can pick and choose there what you like. Another tab to go into would be the drawing tab. This might not be one that we might spend a lot of time in other sessions. A couple things here, some miscellaneous things where we can choose what the background color is. Many people like white, but just as many people like black, but you could also go with a gray or a lighter color as well if you wanted to. So that's where you would find that. A couple other colors here. When you click on an item to select it, what color do you want it to turn, so that you know that it's selected. And then here are file paths where drawing symbols, plot layouts, designs, reports. Where is Irricad looking to find those things? On designs path, you may have a custom route in My Documents instead of the default path for Irricad, but you can point Irricad towards that path to make sure that when you try to open a design, it starts looking in the correct place. Couple other things, ortho mode. Ortho mode, you can have that on and set an angle so that Irricad will only draw in the directions that are set up in the ortho mode. So if I were to have this set to 0 and turn the ortho mode on, I'll just show that real quick. And I start a line, I can only draw that line at the degree set in the ortho mode and then in 90-degree intervals from it. So since it was set to 0, Irricad, 0 degrees is to the right or due east, to 90 degrees is straight north or to the top, and then obviously 180 and 270. So if I'm in ortho mode and I want to be temporarily not in ortho mode, I can hold down the control key. Vice versa, if I'm not in ortho mode, it's not toggled on, but I want to be in it temporarily, I can do the same thing. I can turn on, I can hold down the control key and it will temporarily put me in ortho mode. Another thing that people like to be made aware of is the option for the cursors. Small cross is my preference, but many people like the crosshair option. So small cross is going to look like this, obviously. It's a small cross on the screen, but if we go and look at what crosshair might look like, that option is going to look more like this. So some people like this because it projects the lines all the way across the screen, so you can line things up a little bit better. Typically the way it works is people are all in on one way or the other. Very seldom do you see somebody who is ambivalent about those options. So I'm a small cross guy. Anybody that likes crosshairs has issues that hopefully can be resolved at some point in their lives. So just wanted to go through a few basic things here under the drawing tab under the settings menu. And you can see some of the ways, some of the other options here where you can set the characteristics of line types and widths and that sort of a thing. The last tab we'll look at is going to be under the irrigation design specific tab. A few key things here is this is where we define the path where Irricad is looking to find your component database. the database that Irricad is actively using with the design that you're working on. And we're going to have other sessions that talk quite a bit about the databases, but just want to let you know that that's where you can direct Irricad and click on those that button to the right, and you can browse to wherever the database that you want to use in conjunction with the design that you're working on. Also here under the lines section is where many designers like to have, say, their mainline pipes and their zone pipes at different relative widths, so they can distinguish those easier, especially if they're using the same color for the same size. Sometimes that width is helpful. So here's another area where you can customize the widths of laterals, mainline pipes, wires, those types of things. So so that's a quick tour of things that we might not otherwise look at under the settings menu. And so we'll cancel out of there. Oh, I got to change that back to the small cross. Okay. We talked about the menus across the top for accessing tools and features. We've also talked a little bit about the toolbar buttons for accessing tools and features. Many of you with a CAD background may be real comfortable using keyboard commands. And so I want to spend a little bit of time showing you what Irricad has in relation to using keyboard commands in order to activate tools or features. So the way Irricad works is a little bit different than maybe some of the others, and that's that you have to use the Alt key to activate a keyboard command for the most part. So if you look closely across the top here at these menus, I'm going to hit the Alt key. When I hit the Alt key, you're going to see that there is a letter under each of those that has been underlined. In the case of the View menu, the V has been underlined. So when you hit Alt, it then underlines whatever letters you would need to use to activate that menu. So in this case, since I hit Alt, if I go Alt, then V for View with the keyboard, it's going to fly out all the options, the drop-down list of the options under the View menu. And then if I were to go T for Toolbars, then it would get me into the Customized Toolbars section. So that takes a little bit of time to kind of learn those. You hit Alt, hit the first letter that activates the toolbar or the menu that you're looking for. And in this case, if I were to go, say, W instead, that's going to get me into the Zoom window tool. Oftentimes when you're in a tool, Irricad will let you know that down here and let you know what it's expecting next. So it's expecting you to add a corner point and do a selection window. We don't have anything on the screen really to look at as far as that goes, but to get a sense for what those how the keyboard commands work is very helpful. So let me get this out of my way so I can get to the help menu. Sorry about that. Another menu that we want to spend a fair amount of time in today is the help menu. So if you have questions, if you need to learn more about your version of Irricad, if you want to learn more about specific functions or steps in the process, the help menu is where you're going to go to find the majority of that information. So when you select the help menu, you're going to see a few things. One is about Irricad. So about Irricad is going to tell you information about your current installation of Irricad. That's going to tell you what version you're running. So in this case, we just got access to a version 19 beta, which is exciting for us because there's a lot of good features, and we'll have an entire webinar session later in the process or in our timeline that will highlight a lot of those. But this is where you see what version you're actually running. You see the serial number of your USB key or dongle, which will also be typically located up here when you open the program as well. And then you'll see your dongle version, meaning which version is your dongle enabled for. So you may be running version 18, but your dongle version may be enabled for 19, and you just need to upgrade in order to be able to run version 19, but your dongle is already enabled for that version. So whether this is for your own information or whether you're calling or emailing for support and you get asked about the version of Irricad that you're running and those types of things, just know that under the help menus, About Irricad is a place to find that information. Also under the help menus, one of the brand new things in version 19 is the ability to automatically check for available updates to the software. So that's been something that's been on a list for a while. We're excited to have it. You can manually check for updates here, or under the configure updates, you're going to get a pop-up that allows you to define the frequency of how often you wanted to check for updates, what folder do you want it to automatically download to, and a few other things that you can configure as far as options for updates, automatic updates. So that's a new feature we're excited to have and to learn more about. But first and foremost, also here from Support Forum, you can click there. That'll take you straight to the forum on the irricad.com website. And that's a great resource of information. It's a library of questions that have been asked already. Many questions are the questions that you already may have, so you can search that database. You can register for the forum and ask your own questions. It's monitored by the software developers and support team. And there's also a lot of frequently asked questions and user tips that are also available there. So that's another great place to sign up and have access to support. But we'll spend a little bit of time here under the help topics. This is where the user manual for Irricad exists. When you purchase Irricad, if you already purchased it, you don't get a big thick written manual. Instead, it's incorporated into the help menus here digitally in a way that's searchable and a little more user-friendly. So the first tab that'll come up is the Contents tab. And you'll see that there are several entries here. And we'll go to the user manual. If you've used a menu like this before, where there's a little plus sign, if you click that, it expands it.
Hey, Mike, you may have to share that. Stop sharing Irricad and share the help menu.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Are we seeing that now?
Yes, that's coming through. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. So anyways, going back to the Contents tab here, we have a few options here. And if you click on the plus sign to the left, it'll expand the topics. You can continue to expand the topics and dig down deeper and deeper into the user manual for specific topics that you're looking at. One of the introduction that we thought would be useful to look at together is a simple glossary of terms. So it's not extensive, but it's about 15 or 16 terms here that are worth knowing. The way Irricad uses these terms is good to know. For example, zone pipes, the definition of what Irricad thinks of as a zone pipe, good to know. And that obviously within the industry, zone pipes can also be referred to as manifold pipes or submain pipes. There's a lot of different terminology, but this allows you to take a quick look at how Irricad defined those terms. And so when you see them in manuals and other places, you'll have a better understanding of those basic terms. But you're going to go through here and find a lot of useful information. We'll spend a little bit more time in another session talking about the design process, the steps, the details. And so that's also here in the help menus, some information, kind of introductory information before you get started heavily into the process. But another area to be very familiar with or know that it's here is the tutorials. So the tutorials, there's a whole list of tutorials that are embedded into the help menus. Some of them I will say are very basic tutorials, so you can go through and work through these, and they are going to give you the very basic ones are just going to be, hey, let's put an outlet on the screen, let's connect it with some pipe, let's put a valve and a water supply on there, let's do the very, very basics to understand how Irricad works. And then we have other design tutorials that are going to broach specific design types, a drip tape, an orchard design, micro irrigation, a solid set sprinkler, a wheel line designs, different design types. There's going to be tutorials built around those. And then I'd say there's also another batch of tutorials that I would say what I call feature tutorials, where they're not necessarily about putting a full design together, but they're things like how to edit or create plot templates, or how to create new symbols or modify existing symbols. Those types of things that are useful to know. They're not necessarily design tutorials, but they are feature tutorials. So good to know that all those tutorials are there and available to you. We can also provide additional tutorials oftentimes, depending on the types of designs that you do. But this is a great place to start to learn about Irricad, learn about the steps. And the nice thing about the tutorials is not only do they teach you about the process, but they also allow you to touch and feel some of the features and tools and get a little more comfortable with the working environment of Irricad. Let's see, another place we want to look at in the content section is the technical reference. So under technical reference, here's where we're going to find some information that sometimes feels hidden, but this is where you find things like Irricad limits. So I click on that, it tells me information about what the limits are of Irricad. Number of pipe segments in a zone, for example, 5,000, same thing, 5,000 pipe segments of mainline in a design. You can have up to 12,500 junctions in any given zone, as well as in the mainline. Number of system flows per zone is 10. The number of water supplies is 10. So here's where you can look and find some of the upper limits in Irricad. They're pretty expansive, so you would be hard pressed to reach those limits, but it's good to know what they are and where to find them. Also, another one of interest is on the Appendix H, forms of the equations. So if you're wondering what Irricad is using in terms of equations to come up with the hydraulic results that it does, whether it's outlet flow or valve loss, those types of things, here's where we can see the equations that Irricad uses. As you're working in Irricad, you may get a screen message about an error of some sort. And under screen messages, error messages is where we have a whole library, alphabetical order based on the description of the name of the error message. That will be in the pop-up when you have an error, it will tell you. So you may have one that is, as I'm scrolling through this, you maybe have one that says DBS 6. And what does that mean? Well, it means there's no items enabled in the database for the purpose that it's looking for. It gives you a little bit of information here. And then obviously you can also access the Irricad support team if you're not able to resolve what your error is based on the information here. But good to know and learn a little bit more about what those error messages are. So if we move to the index tab, this is a little bit different way to access the user manual through keywords. So here, instead of having to click in and out and figure out where things are, we can use some keywords in order to figure out, to learn more about certain things. For example, if I were to type in zone pipe, it's going to automatically drive me to the entry for zone pipes. If I double click on that, If there's multiple places in the user manual that addresses zone pipes, I'm going to get a whole list of places that I can go to click on. This top one is going to just take me to that glossary that we already looked at, but I could look in other areas here on how to make changes to zone pipes and those types of things. And so here's a way we can use keywords to access some of the same information that's in the user manual without having to parse through every piece of it. So let's see. So if I want to, give me a second here. If I stop sharing altogether.
Yes, you're not sharing your screen at the moment, Mike. You'll have to go back to the Irricad one.
There we go.
Perfect.
And then lastly, under the help menus is release notes. And so release notes is where you would go to find all the information and new features and tools in the latest version that you're using. So when version 19 is released, and everybody has a chance to upgrade to that. Inside, just like the help menus, the help topics, there's a breakdown where you can dig into the new features and learn more about them. So release notes is something every time we have a new release, it's good to spend a fair amount of time in there and understand what the new features are available to you. So, so that kind of covers going through the menus a little bit. We do have some time left that I'm going to spend a little bit of time with some of the basic CAD drawing tools. But before we get to that, was there anything, Graham, that we needed to address before I move on? Is this a logical point for a pause, or should I keep going?
There were some questions on snapping, perhaps draw a circle and snap to the center of it, or snap to a line, something like that. Or so if
Okay.
you're going to cover that in what you're doing next, great. But if not, it might be good to go over that.
Oh, that's great. That's a perfect segue into the next section. So I can do that for sure. So, so let's talk about a little bit about some of the basic CAD drawing tools, whether it's lines, rectangles, circles. As we said, there are tool buttons for most of the features. And in fact, one thing I probably didn't highlight that I should, under the draw menu here, I can choose to draw a line. And there's different types of lines. So as I hover over line, I get a little fly out with a couple other options here. And so as you go through these menus, you'll see to the left of many of these, the little icon. And that icon is the same as whatever the tool button associated with that tool would be. So in this case, under line, single line, that icon there is the same icon I would use under the toolbars in order to invoke the same tool. So in that case, I'm going to go find that here under the single line tool button, and we'll use the tool buttons for this next section to drive some of these CAD tools that I want to show. So if I go here and I've started a line, down here in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to tell me it's waiting for me to draw a line. I'm in the single line mode. There's a couple different ways I can do that. Obviously, I can just use the left click on my mouse in order to click in a place, start a line. I'll have this green rubber band attached to my cursor as I pull towards wherever I want the second point on the line to be. And if I just simply left click, then I've drawn my single line. But I could also do that by using the keyboard. So if I were to just enter, so I'm still in the single line mode. If I want to start another line, I could use the keyboard as well. So if I were to type in, and if you look at the lower left-hand corner, it'll show what I type. If you can see that, sometimes it's hard to see on a webinar. 0, 0, and hit enter. It's going to start a line. Let me do a zoom all here. it's going to start a line at the 0, 0 coordinate. And if I were to come in here and type another set of coordinates, that would be where the line would finish. So if I were to come in here and type in, let's say 800, comma 800, then the second point of my line is going to end at the x equals 800, y equals 800 coordinate. A couple other ways to do that as well. If I start a line and whatever, and if I look at my distance and my angle here, whatever angle my cursor is, I can, if I have the cursor drawn at the angle I'd like it to be to draw the line, then I can simply type in the distance. So if I want that line to be a 500-foot line, I can just type in 500, hit enter, and Irricad's going to draw the line at whatever angle my cursor is from the original point at that 500-foot length. So several ways to do it, whether it's with the keyboard or with the mouse to enter that information. I can also define, if I'm in the select object mode, which is this arrow icon here, I can double click on anything on the screen and have it pull up what the properties are. So I could also change any of those properties after the effect, effect here. If I wanted to change that angle, I could certainly change that angle. If I wanted to change the color or the width, I could do any of those things here and make those changes. We also have this current toolbar up here, and this is where I could make some semi-permanent changes to those, to what I want Irricad to do. So if I wanted to draw several lines and I didn't want to have to go back and modify each one of them, I could come in here and say, hey, I want a line of this color and a line of this width. And now anytime I draw a line, it's going to reflect those properties until I go back and change those back to something else. So a couple different options there. Rectangles are pretty simple, straightforward. A couple options. The most common one, probably, at least that I use, is the 2-point rectangle. So we'll use this toolbar tool button, and it's going to say enter the corner point for a 2-point rectangle. I click in one corner, and you see as I drag across to the other corner and click again, it's going to create that rectangle. So pretty simple. And I can also use, Irricad has some tools for me to be able to determine what the area of that rectangle is, or any other closed tool, whether it's a rectangle or a circle or a closed polyline. And that's down here where it says, currently says none, because I haven't defined anything in that area. But if I were to right click over that, we call that the info panel, part of the info panel. If I right click there, I can choose any of these things to be defined or populated in that area. So if I choose area, it's going to tell me right now 0 acres, because I haven't selected anything that has a closed boundary. But if I go to the select object mode and I click on this rectangle, it's now going to tell me that there are a little over 20 acres, just shy of 21 acres enclosed in that rectangle. If I click on another, just a single line, that number is not going to change, because those single lines don't have area associated with them. They're not enclosed. But if I right click in this same area again and get this to pop up, it will tell me one of the options is count. So it says I have 3 items selected, and the total length of all 3 of those items, so the length of the 2 lines and the perimeter of the rectangle, in this case equals 6,384 feet. So useful area to be able to take some quick counts, measurements, figure out what the area is of certain things. So good thing to know there. And then let's see, I'm going to deselect those. and we'll do a circle. The most common one I use is a center radius circle. So I can just come up here and click a center point. And as I pull out, I can look at the distance. That's going to tell me what my radius of my circle is. And when I click my second point, it's going to create that circle. So talking about snapping and some of those types of tools brings me to showing you another way to access some of the tools, and that's through the right-click menu. So if I do the right-click menu, I'm going to get a pop-up here, depending on what mode I'm in. If I'm in a drawing mode or any other mode, I may get different options here. But let's do this. Let's go into drawing a single line, and let's go into the snaps. So there's running snaps where you can set up persistent snaps if you want them to be kind of engaged all the time. Certain snaps are used commonly. Or there's, we can just invoke them individually, just using the snaps option. So if I were to go snap and endpoint, and I were to come hover over the end of this line, Irricad, when I click, it's automatically going to snap to the endpoint of that line. And then I can draw my line from there. Or if I use let's say we use the midpoint option, then Irricad is going to snap automatically to the midpoint of that existing line that I had on the screen to start my new line. So it's done that by measurement and found the midpoint and automatically snapped to it when I'm in range of that existing line. So you can learn a lot about those snaps here, go through them, and also under running snaps. Running snaps is where you can have them persistent, so they're kind of enabled all the time. We won't spend too much more time on that, but that's where you can access that for sure. And then we want to talk about polylines real quick. If I let me zoom out here a little bit and give myself a little bit more space. Polyline is essentially a continuous line instead of a single line. So if I go around clicking around, I can trace a boundary or create a specific shape that I want to. If I accidentally click over here and didn't mean to, a valuable tool is under the right-click menu, what we call the undo vertex. If I hit undo vertex, it's going to back me up. It'll continue to back me up as many times as I invoke it. And I get to a part where I'm ready to start again instead of having to start the line completely over. And then if I want to close this boundary so it measures acreage, the reason I want to do that is especially if I'm going to use it as a block entity to create block entities, which we'll discuss in detail in other sessions. I want to make sure that it's closed properly. So if I just come over here and click on the first segment, it won't necessarily close the way I want it to. Instead, I'm going to do right-click and close. And when I do that, and I select the object, Irricad's going to show me that I have area associated with that object. In this case, a little over 9 acres. So another way to look at acreage of areas is using the show area tool. So that's a tool that can be used, invoked, and when you it's a little bit different than using the acreage tool down here below. If I click on a closed area, it's going to give me a pop-up that tells me how many acres are there. In this case, it's going to be the same as what it showed us down here, a little over 9 acres. But in this case, the show area tool being different is that when I click in an area that is bisected by another drawing item, it will show me just the area that I have clicked in. So in this case, only 2 acres or 1.94 acres of that circle, which normally the whole entire thing measures a little over 2.4 acres. So show area tool allows me to look at what the acreage area is of an area that is not an entire independent entity, but has bisecting lines that define it as a smaller sub area, in this case, 5.3 acres. So the other thing that we can do with this tool, the last thing probably we'll talk about here, is the polygon seed option. The polygon seed option allows me to select that area and have Irricad create a closed polygon based on the area as it's defined where I select. So if I click in the middle of this circle and I were to delete the original one, you can see that it's created a closed area just defined by the area that it was showing area for. So I can grab that and move that anywhere I want to, and that's useful for creating boundaries when you have something like maybe a fence line running through a field or a canal running through a field, and you want to be able to subdivide or subdefine those areas. So the last thing I'll show you is a little trick that's helpful. If I go back on here and undo a few things, I have a couple lines here. I have my original circle, and then I have the newly created portion of a circle, and they're both sitting on top of each other. So if I mean to select one, sometimes it's hard to select if I'm trying to select that new one, but here I'm clicking and it's doing the rectangle, and here I'm clicking and it's selecting the circle. In the select object mode, if I hold down the control key and select, it's going to give me a little fly out and let me know what all is in range to be selected in the select object mode. So in this case, I don't want the entire circle, I want just the polyline. And so holding down the control key when I select objects that have potential overlap allows me to select the one that I'm specifically looking for. So, anyways, that is all the information that we've kind of set aside for today. Hopefully the goal is accomplished, that you're a little more comfortable with Irricad, be able to find things through the help menus, customize things a little bit, and have a little bit of a basic orientation to CAD. And that being said, I'll turn the time back over to Graham. If we have time for any questions, or if we want to wrap things up, I'll let you do that.
Thank you very much, Mike. You do a fantastic job of that overview of Irricad and letting everyone know what's available, and even experienced users get a lot of benefit from hearing you and watching you do those things. So thanks, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining today. As I mentioned at the beginning, there will be a recording of this webinar, and once we have it hosted on a server, we will send you a link to that server, and it will be a resource for a very long time. The next webinar that we have planned is on elevations, creating, importing, interpolating, and talking about the digital elevation model and how it affects the design process. That's in 2 days' time on Friday, January the 8th at 11 a.m. Pacific time in the United States. And then on Monday the 11th, we have another one specifically on the Google Earth import, which we won't cover this Friday. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar, and we'll see you in a couple of days. Bye for now.